It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And the thing has happened. The big thing that we spend all year counting down towards. It doesn't feel real when it's finally over. Like, what do I do with my hands now? I'm not quite sure, but we have a few more episodes in the 2025 draft cycle, Colin, and we are going to break down some of the action from last week right here today.
Yeah. Today is a little bit of how much does the draft matter? You know, we kind of have been framing a lot of our pre-draft discussions on that of, well, we have this evaluation of the player. Now it goes out of our hands, and NFL teams tell you what they think of these players too, and how much do you calculate that in to your actual rookie drafts when it comes time to put these players on your dynasty teams. And that's kind of what today's episode is. We'll have, bigger picture rankings, next week, and we'll have more down the pipeline. And then 2026, here we come. Because the train doesn't stop for anybody. We'll obviously stick with these players if you've been around Camp Dynasty through all grown up next year. But this is really, these next couple weeks are the last hurrah for the 2025 class.
Yeah, if you can believe it or not, we only have 4 more episodes with this class. That's how quickly it has come and gone. We will be working our way through our post-draft content. Next week is the big shebang. It's the top 48 final rankings. I know a lot of leagues, or at least a decent chunk of leagues now, are drafting immediately after the NFL draft.
I already finished the draft.
You've already finished one. You came out pretty well in your draft. But I still think it's psychopathic because we still don't even, the dust hasn't even settled, and I'm like, I'm not ready.
Rookie mini camp hasn't even started yet.
Yeah, right. So, but, so we try to, crank it out as quickly as we can here. I know some have, already come and gone, but we're going to get into our top 48 next week. We're going to hit IDPs the following week, top 20 final IDP rankings there. But today, we are recapping. We are collecting our thoughts. I'm not ready to pump out the 48 yet. I'm still ruminating on a lot of things that happened. Of course, there's always surprises at the NFL draft when it comes to, oh my God, this guy just landed here. What do we do with that? So what we're going to do today is take a look at the 12 picks that changed Dynasty rookie drafts. We are going to look at 12 players that we feel their landing spot has altered the Dynasty rookie board the most, and that will likely be reflected next week when we talk about our final rankings. Before we get there, though, we were in Green Bay, hometown, for the draft. It was an amazing experience, a bucket list experience, good and bad, I think. I think there's pros and cons. It's not something I feel the need to ever do again. I feel like it's a one and done, honestly.
Yeah, if I'm not, covering the draft professionally, I don't know if, being there as a fan, it's a great TV product. One of the all-time, sit on your couch and watch the picks fly off the board, hear the chimes, get the breakdown from DJ, listen to Mel Kiper scream, something that we missed, which, oh no, that was terrible. But yeah, it was really cool to be in Green Bay. I've kind of been giving little bits of updates since I live here of hey, everything's going up, things are shutting down. And it felt like Green Bay as a city did a great job hosting the draft. It seems like they understood the magnitude of this event and really had everything buttoned down. There was very little issues infrastructurally, which was a surprise because it's only 105,000 people live here and 600,000 people attended the draft over the 3 days. So that was really well done by Green Bay. The event itself was really well executed. But like you said, the actual fan experience of going there, at, you were there earlier than I was, and then I came and met you. But like even me getting there at like, 4 o'clock and then staying until 10:30 and just basically finding a spot as close as you can to the stage and just posting up and not being able to leave, or you're like not getting your spot back. It was a little bit rough on the body. Like my back was hurting, my legs were hurting, but I mean, things you do to see like Will Campbell walk across the stage and say that he's willing to die for Drake May. It all ends up evening out in the end, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, first and foremost, like, yeah, it was executed to perfection. I was expecting the worst. I didn't understand how 500,000 plus people were going to pile in there over the course of the weekend and that was going to work. And they certainly made it work. So props to, the planning and everything that went into making that a smooth and successful event in Green Bay. But yes, it was certainly like, it definitely had the bucket list feel the first time got inside on Thursday and walked up to the stage. And like at that, it was like 1 o'clock and there weren't a ton of people there. So like you get pretty close, you really get to take it in. And it was like, holy shit, we're at the draft. Like this is the draft stage. And that's kind of chills and like a lot of years in the making. And then like you said, we kind of got our spot. We were pretty close in the grand scheme of things because like you turn around and there's like, 200,000 people behind you and you're like, holy shit. But standing there for 10 hours or whatever it ended up being, it was a little rough on the body. So, but yeah, it was incredible experience and glad we got to do it for sure. So,
and you have in our document live band, which I did not come in here ready to talk about, but do you want to? That is something that you don't hear on the broadcast.
No,
which is an incredible feat of like audio engineering that somehow you can't hear them on the broadcast because the broadcasts are on stage and like you can tell because the camera shots have the crowd in the background, but like they're probably 20 feet from the live band and you can almost not like you don't hear them at all, which is impressive.
Yeah, I didn't I was going to go back and watch some of it and see, but like, yeah, to your point, it didn't sound like you could hear anything from the band that was playing like in between almost every single pick. And it got to the point where like people were booing by like pick 16 because it was like they weren't that great. And like, I think it was like the combination of like, oh man, I don't get to hear like DJ talk about the draft. I have to just like stand here and listen to this cover band. It was like, I think everybody was like sore and tired.
And I think you like underestimate how long it takes between picks. When you aren't like, oh, I can get up and like go get a beer, or I can like, go grab a snack, or just kind of hang out and chat for a little bit. Like you underestimate that it takes like, everybody uses a lot of the draft clock, and then once the pick is in, it's not like the guy comes out immediately. You also have another 5-10 minutes, and so that's also another piece of like, it's like 15-20 minutes between every pick. Yeah. And you're just kind of standing there waiting, and then you hear this like band cover a Black Eyed Peas song that you really don't want to hear after like 6 hours of standing still, and you're gonna like piss yourself. Like
literally couldn't leave. You couldn't leave. It was impossible.
It took you at least an hour and a half to get back to your spot. It was, but again, really cool experience. Enjoy myself, but there were definitely some challenges.
Won't be in Pittsburgh next year though. That's the that's the message. So, but all right, we're going to dive into these 12 picks, and then at the end we will talk about the big names that we did not hit on this list. I think we've talked certainly a lot about the top players in this class. We will talk a lot more about them next week now that we finally understand where they're playing, but we will give some initial reactions at least. Like, I don't want to go 2 weeks before I tell you how I feel about Ashton Jeanty being a Raider. So we'll talk about that at the end. For any, big top names that we don't hit on the list. There are a few of those, though, so we'll get into that. Also, I do want to just say, as kind of a little bit of a teaser, yes, we are talking about Shedeur Sanders in this episode. That will be later in the program, so you'll have to stick around to hear what we have to say about that, or you can cheat and go to the timestamp. I won't judge you if you do that, but we will give our 2 cents on that whole entire situation, not just the player and the spot. So,
and once again, not watching the draft broadcast and then like going back and like checking Twitter and seeing that like it's all the draft was about. It was kind of refreshing to be like, I'm kind of glad that I didn't have to endure that watching ESPN.
Yeah, good year to miss the draft coverage, and also a good segue into I'm only watching NFL Network for like every draft moving forward, I think. But
yeah.
All right, let's dive into it. 12 picks. These are in, I would say, no particular order. We did draft names so that we had some equal representation, but I don't think I was picking like the name that most changed on my board. I was kind of just winging it. I don't know if that's how you were approaching it, but
kind of, I was like, what draft picks interested me the most or surprised me the most. But yeah.
So to start, a player, if you listen to Camp Dynasty, you know that this is the biggest, most pro Matthew Golden podcast that you're going to find. Green Bay Packer Matthew Golden.
We did kind of like a little draft with these guys, and I had the first pick, and I was like, we got to do Matthew Golden because, first of all, we are probably a little lower than consensus on Golden, I would say. But second of all, like, the moment that Matthew Golden got picked at the draft was insane because obviously the Packers, I've been saying just write wide receiver off as there's no chance the Packers pick wide receiver in the first round. But then like Mark Murphy coming up and like selling the pick of like for the first time, it was nuts. But on top of all that, it's like, what does this mean for Matthew Golden is where you end up. And does it move him up or down? And does he become like the number one receiver on the Packers, or does he become just like another one of these like guys in this room because it feels like they have a lot of any given Sunday kind of wide receivers where, Romeo Doubs could have 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, or Jaden Reed could have 160 all-purpose yards, or Christian Watson could go off for 3 touchdowns. And I think he probably falls into the camp of like that's where he ends up, but I also wouldn't be surprised if, he's the only guy that is a separator on this team that maybe you can consistently go to on, third down, but who knows?
Yeah, this one's tricky because, like, in a way, I kind of feel like he's going to stay right where he was in my rankings with this one because, yes, he got the first round spot. That wasn't necessarily unexpected. So that was already sort of baked in, I think, from our front, at least, we're ranking based off of the talent, but I also think there's this voice in the back of your head that's like, well, he's going to be a first round pick. So how much does that matter to me? And in this case, he goes to the spot where, obviously he will have, given the draft capital, the opportunity to be the one that stands out here. So I think in that sense, you could say this is a bump for him and this could move him up draft boards. And I'm looking at KTC because now we get to finally like bring some of this in here. Slight value bump for Matthew Golden following draft night. So,
which is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like there's been a positive reaction to the Packers spot. And right now he is ranked as the 11th rookie on KTC. So that's going to be a little bit higher than we have had him. And I am anticipating I will continue to have him more of a top of the second pick in Dynasty. And honestly, I feel like this spot from my perspective only solidifies that because I'm not sure that he is, I don't know if this is like a success spot for him. Like, I think, to your point, I think he's going to be competing alongside all of these other names for targets. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be, it's fun that the Packers did this. They also drafted Savion Williams later on in the draft, and that was also really interesting because, like I mentioned before, they have just a lot of names in that wide receiver room, and they bring in Mecole Hardman in the offseason, and like there's just a ton of guys, and they very clearly have like this, run first offense with Josh Jacobs that is going to have some like space to work with their wide receivers because of the play action game and LaFleur's scheme. And, I think Savion Williams comes in more as like a returner special team guy that is also kind of a gadgety, jet sweeps. LaFleur loves them. And now you can have like a guy that's been doing that at TCU instead of your like Jaden Reed, who's potentially your most talented receiver. And then Golden can just be like a pure receiver out there. And so there's definitely a lot of nuance with what this ends up being. It's not some like, that's why I think it's interesting that he raised in consensus, because I feel like this is like a really confusing spot. Like, yeah, he's paired with a dynamic young quarterback, but like there's so many names and so many ways that maybe he doesn't end up being like a high volume target guy in this offense. And I think that works out for them, but I just don't know if that works out for Golden in a fantasy perspective. Like, does he average 8 targets a game? Like, that seems kind of high. So I don't know where I'm going to end up on him, but I don't know if he rose in my like mind other than I think I'm going to love this player unless he wears number 22.
Yeah. The Packers fan in you is like, yeah,
this is awesome,
to the moon, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. I literally said that when it's like, if they take Golden here, I'm all in. I don't care. And you were like, well, they're not going to do that. So why are you even talking about it?
I said that so many times.
Yeah.
Where someone's like, well, if they take this wide receiver, I'm like, well, they're not. Yeah. So let's stop thinking about it.
And that's exactly why they did, because we all finally accepted that it was never going to happen. All right. The next player on our list is a player that will be moving on the board for me. Absolutely. And that player is Colston Loveland. Colston Loveland was drafted as the first tight end in this class. He went number 10 overall. He was a top 10 selection going to the Chicago Bears and the new Ben Johnson offense. If we remember back to our final pre-draft rankings, I had sort of like a little bit of an episode, I feel like, maybe some sort of like mini stroke situation happening, because I could not figure out how to speak about Colston Loveland. And the reason for that was, for most of the day, I had him right next to Tyler Warren in my rankings. I had Warren at 7 and I had Loveland at 8. And I was like, there's no way you can have 2 tight ends in your top 8. It just doesn't feel right, especially with this running back class. But the reason I say that is just to say that these players have been extremely close for me through the entire process. Tyler Warren has always been my tight end 1, but that margin has been very, very small. So this landing spot, tied to where Tyler Warren ended up going, and also just the fact that he was prioritized as the NFL's tight end 1 as well, Colston Loveland will be my tight end 1 next week when we talk about our final rankings. That will absolutely be happening, and it's because of this spot.
I'm pretty hesitant to like do that, because though being a top 10 pick and going as the tight end 1 and being in a very interesting offense. Like, I think we are really optimistic about this Bears offense. Whether or not that's going to turn out to be a good thing, I don't know, because we were just as optimistic like last year, and it turned out to be bad. But now the circumstances have changed so drastically between then and now, even where we were looking at like, wow, you know, Matt Eberflus and company with this like rookie quarterback and all these good skill players. Like, this is wheels up. And now they've done even more to like reassure confidence where, I mean, they take like Burden, who we'll talk about later, and to take Loveland and get Ben Johnson, end up not going running back, which is really interesting because like now are they planning on throwing 40 times a game? Like, it kind of seems like it. But they invest in O-line, and Kaleb gets another year under his belt, where I feel really good about Colston Loveland because you have like, sure, you have a lot of targets to go around and a lot of names in this offense, but Colston Loveland is already like one of the best targets in this offense, and like maybe it takes a year or two for him to get like fully integrated and fully like up to NFL speed. And like, don't panic, I would say, about like, oh, Colston Loveland day one isn't, he's not Sam Laporta in his rookie year. Like, that's okay. But I think that this could end up very well being like a top dynasty asset in a very short amount of time because of, what this offense can do and like what he can do to grow with this, new regime that's coming in with the Bears.
Man, I'm excited to see it. I don't think it's going to be, I don't necessarily expect it to be instant impact either, because I don't think we should ever expect that with a tight end, but let Colston Loveland surprise us and have that sort of Sam Laporta-esque impact as a rookie and earn what's going to be certainly a top 10, probably a little bit higher than that draft spot in my final rankings. Quinshon Judkins.
Yeah, Quinshon Judkins was my next selection. He went 36 to the Browns. So we've been obviously talking about this running back class for a really long time and the landing spots that we prefer and how many running backs we think are going to go in the first round versus, on day two, and, all everything you could possibly talk about with a running back class. I think we've covered in the last, 4 or 5 months. But Judkins was the third running back off the board. You had Jeanty and Omarion Hampton go in the first round, and then Judkins shortly after in the second round. And he goes to a team that really needs running back. They end up taking Sampson later on in the draft. I think he was 6th or 7th pick. He's on day 3. But Judkins was their, is basically their only running back with like real capital invested into him. And I've always been a really big Judkins fan. And now, you sit here and you look and you're like, man, this is like a pretty good spot. I know this offense is kind of really screwy with everything that's gone on. And, now they have like Jerry Jeudy and Deontay Johnson on the outside, and they have like 6 random quarterbacks that like, if you put them all in like a bingo cage and rolled them out, you probably got like the worst 6 outcomes you could. But Quinshon Judkins is a fun player on a team that really had a running back need. So I liked this in terms of like, where could Judkins have ended up? Could he have like ended up as some random RB2 on a team, like some goal line guy, short yardage guy? I think he ended up in a pretty advantageous spot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've seen at least one person already that has like what seems to be moved Quinshon down. Like I couldn't tell if there was a negative reaction to this spot or not. According to KTC, this is being viewed as a positive spot for him. Yeah. And I think that is completely, that's what we should be talking about this like. I mean, he was one of the first running backs off the board. He was the RB3, right? Am I correct in that? So third running back off the board, high second round, to a spot that we've talked about already as a, they need a running back. And this offense is, designed, regardless of what's going on in the quarterback room, they want to run the ball. And Nick Chubb is gone, so we need the next guy. And I think Quinshon Judkins is uniquely positioned with his skill set to sort of take on a pretty significant workload right out the get-go. He's got the size. He's got the talent. I think this is going to be a hit the ground running situation. They don't really have anybody else there that can seriously compete with him. So like KTC right now, he's moved up an entire spot in the rookie rankings. He is rookie number 5 right now on KTC. And I'd imagine he's going to sit somewhere similarly for me when we look at it next week as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about a player whose draft stock may have been negatively impacted. This is not just 12 guys who rose up the board. This is the picks that changed the draft one way or the other. And the first name we're talking about as a potential faller in this class is Jaylin Noel, who went 79 to the Texans, third round pick for Noel. That was unexpected for me. I fully expected him to be a second round pick based off of the tape, and his postseason process, his pre-draft process was excellent. I thought he had earned a second round spot. He falls to the third round and goes to the Texans, who had selected his teammate, Jaden Higgins, 1 round earlier. So, like, in a way, I kind of love it because I know for a fact you and I had once talked about, man, I wish these guys could just play together in the NFL.
Yeah.
So, like, from that perspective, I love it. And I love what Houston's wide receiver room looks like following this draft. But for Noel, I mean, we were talking about him in the middle of the second round a couple weeks ago. I think that's going to have to change moving forward, being that he went later in the draft and is not even the first wide receiver that they took.
Yeah, it seems that the NFL was more worried about like his size and maybe his hand size and his arm length a little more than we were, because like we liked the tape so much that I don't know if I cared a whole lot, but the NFL tells us like, yeah, don't love, the super skinny, running speedster. Like maybe he is what he is, but ends up on the Texans. Like you said, like kind of a interesting spot because they really only had before the draft Nico Collins and like Christian Kirk, who is at this point like pretty solid. Like he's a good depth receiver to have on the team, but he's not going to change your life. And then, Jaden Higgins goes to them in the second round, and then Noel, obviously Tank Dell's on this team, but his knee blew up in that game, so he's going to miss all of this year. So it's definitely not like a bad spot in terms of potential production, but it's not ideal having him fall down and not end up being like a cool wide receiver 2 on like the Patriots, like we were hoping for, something like that. So definitely not going to be as high as we wanted him to be, but I don't think it's like a free fall for him.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think he'll move down a little bit, but I still love the talent so much. And like Houston's wide receiver room needed bodies, like not a body. So Christian Kirk is fine for right now, but I would expect, Jaylin Noel, given the talent that we both think that he has, should be able to seize hold of that slot role, I would say, even as soon as this season, potentially down the stretch. So, but it is interesting because I just checked on KTC and he's been a big riser actually since the draft, but I'm pretty sure it's just because KTC didn't really seem to know who this player was before.
Yeah.
like right before the draft, he's like wide receiver 92, and all of a sudden he's wide receiver 65 after the draft. So
third round pick.
Yeah.
That's what it'll do for you.
All right. Let's talk about another wide receiver. This one a little bit more high profile.
Yeah, so Emeka Egbuka went 19 to the Bucks, and that was, pretty high, where we kind of had some conversations about where we think Egbuka and we would land, and we both agreed that there's a pretty wide range of outcomes for this player, where he could go, in the teens like he did, or he could end up like falling into like the mid-second round. And I think that was all very realistic. But he ends up going to the Buccaneers at 19, which is why I included him on this list, because the Buccaneers, like, wide receiver room is kind of solid with Chris Godwin coming back, with Mike Evans, Godwin, and McMillan, and then you have like a little bit of a cast of characters that can kind of slot in and fill in. But they go Egbuka anyway. They obviously felt like this was a position they needed to shore up. And the reason it's interesting is because Godwin is like a fantastic slot receiver. McMillan, good in the slot. And we project Egbuka as a pure slot receiver. So that's why it's like, man, at first I was thinking this is not good for Egbuka. But then you look at it another way and it's like, well, they picked him 19. Godwin, like, his foot almost fell off. Like, it's not like it's a guarantee that he's going to be back to form. And then, like, McMillan was pretty good, but he can also move around a little bit, I think. I don't think, like, McMillan's purely a slot receiver. And then Egbuka also, I think we talked about a little bit, not, like, strictly a slot, while he should be, like, 70-ish% in the slot, can also move around a little bit. So I've come around on, like, you know what? I kind of like it as like a long-term thing for Egbuka, and then maybe not like 2025 he's going to be extremely productive, but like down the road, I think this is a fine spot for Egbuka.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. I think short-term it's a loss. Like short-term, like 2025 season.
Yeah, like don't take Egbuka in your redraft.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, if you're drafting him in Dynasty, like hoping that 2025 is the year, like it's not going to be, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't take him, because I mean, you had the bold prediction on Spicy Predictions that he would be the first wide receiver drafted. He was the second wide receiver drafted. Like he went above Matthew Golden. Like the NFL, all of the reports about his character and how much that meant to the NFL, it certainly came true. And it came true in the form of a team that didn't even necessarily have the need to take him, selecting him at 19th overall. So I think long-term, there's a ton of upside here with the spot. Chris Godwin, we don't know what it's going to look like coming back from a very significant injury. Even though they did sign him to a long-term contract, there has to be question about what he looks like on the field, this year and moving forward. And then to your point, Jaylin McMillan, I mean, promising season last year, but like, I do think these are guys with versatility. Like you are not just like, oh, Jaylin McMillan can only play in the slot and Emeka Egbuka can only play in the slot. Like, I don't think that is necessarily the case, as you just said as well. So I think long-term, we're still good here with Egbuka. That being said, because it's Dynasty, and because everybody's always sort of looking for a short-term win, do you think he's going to fall in rookie drafts?
Oh, see, I thought that this was going to turn into like buy Emeka Egbuka after his rookie year.
Well, I mean, there's always
conversations that we've had about a lot of players, and like haven't been completely wrong on a lot of them. But yeah, I do think he's going to fall. I'm going to look at my draft that I was in, because I'm kind of interested to see where the people landed. I think they stayed pretty rational. But I feel like he is probably going to fall because people want that like instant gratification kind of thing. Yeah, he went 7 or 8 in this draft. So people stayed pretty smart there, and that's super flex. So I'd say like I think people might want something from Egbuka this year, and maybe they're like, it's a lot of names in the room. But I also like maybe that dynasty player like probably doesn't have a lot of respect for Jaylin McMillan anyway. So like maybe they don't really care. They're like, well, they took this guy 19 overall. He's going to start over Jaylin McMillan, you know?
What's really funny is I'm looking here on the side, KTC lists the top 5 risers and top 5 fallers over the last 30 days. And 2 of the top 5 fallers are Chris Godwin and Jaylin McMillan. So
there you go.
People have clearly spoken that they believe that Emeka Egbuka is the long-term future of this role in the Bucs offense. So to your point, though, I think if people are holding firm, and if you are in a league in which a manager is selecting Emeka Egbuka at 7 because he was the second wide receiver off the board in the draft and he went top 20 and they, he's Ohio State and they recognize the name, you might be able to get that player at the end of the season. Like, people don't like spending high draft capital on players that don't perform as rookies. It feels like there's always a very sour taste in the mouth when that doesn't work well. And as long as you're not, if the guy who has him isn't a savvy player and he's not a big Emeka Egbuka fan, there's always going to be that opportunity at the end of this upcoming season to snag him. That is assuming that he doesn't just walk in and take hold of it, which I'm not saying couldn't happen either.
Right. Yeah. In 10 months, buy Emeka Egbuka.
Yes. We've been right on these every time. I don't know if we've been right on if it's worth buying, but we've been right about will there be a buy window.
Exactly. Right.
So, all right. Next player on the list. This is going to be a fun one because this might just be the biggest, most profound change to a majority of draft boards in the coming weeks. And maybe you've already seen this happen if you've already had a draft, because RJ Harvey went in the second round to the Broncos, pick 60 to the Broncos. And that is a spot that we all sort of were crossing our fingers and hoping that Omarion Hampton would go to, and that did not happen. The running back that they took in the second round was RJ Harvey. He was the 5th running back to come off the board in the NFL draft. One of the biggest shocking moments for me, especially on day 2. I mean, and this is going to manifest in a very intense value surge. I've already seen posts about it, and I'm already seeing on KTC that RJ Harvey has climbed 16 spots. He is like literally straight vertical line from April 28th or 27th or whatever to today. 14th overall rookie already. And I would expect maybe that's not even done climbing. So what do you think about RJ Harvey?
Man, I was surprised to see him go that high, and like to see Sean Payton speak so glowingly about him after he went that high. I thought that was also like kind of surprising, but it's not like we've been talking about, this running back class is so good that like any number of these guys could land in any number of spots. Now, did we have guys that were much higher on our board and at this pick that didn't go? Yeah, but the NFL has spoken, as we talk about with this, is like, what does this mean? I'm not going to move him up a ton, but he's definitely going to move up because like he can't not. You end up being a second round pick, being pick 60. Like, you're going to have opportunity. There's not another running back in this room outside of Audric Estime that like means anything to me. So like now RJ Harvey is going to be definitely featured. So he has to be up in your rankings. And that's not like, because, oh, now I love the player. It's now this player is going to produce because he's going to have opportunity.
So that's the important thing here, because he will move up. But for context, this was my RB 13 in the draft class. He was my 43rd player in my final pre-draft rankings. He was a 4th round pick for me, independent of landing spots. That will certainly change. He will certainly move up the board from being a 4th round pick, of course. However, he will not be a 1st round pick.
No.
He will be maybe a 2nd round pick for me. Like, I have seen such an intense reaction to this as we've seen many, many times before. This is just the latest installment in the Keyshawn Vaughn, that sort of like player that goes way higher than you think to a great spot. And even if you're not completely sold on the talent, they get bumped up the board because we listen to the NFL when the NFL speaks. But guess what? That doesn't always mean anything. So you have to be careful with these sorts of players. And I'm going to say right now, I think in your average league, run-of-the-mill dynasty league, he is a off my board player, because he will not go. He'll be long gone by the time I'm comfortable taking him. That's the point here. Like, he's already RB 14 on KTC. I'm not drafting him anywhere near that spot. I mean, he's 24 years old. Like, he's a 24-year-old running back. Let's just also get that out of the way.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. He went 18 in the league I already drafted in, which feels like pretty reasonable, like from where you land. But I am not going to like be chomping at the bit to like draft RJ Harvey. So like, yeah, my advice is also let somebody else take him high. If he ends up falling to a range where you're like, okay, like I guess I ran out of guys in this tier, and now like I draft the next guy that's going to be starting that like maybe I don't love. That's when you pull the trigger on him. But I wouldn't be like excited about taking Harvey really high.
And it's not even the fact that I don't like the player. Like, that's it. This is always going to come across as, oh, you don't like RJ Harvey. That's not true. I think RJ Harvey is a fun player, explosive, fast, has ability to make guys miss. I mean, he was one of the most productive running backs in college football this year. He had a hell of a year. We talked about him in the season. He got at least one badge here. Mm-hmm. It's not the fact that I don't think he's a good player. He is an undersized 24-year-old running back. So, like, by the time you get to his rookie season, like, you're already in like a sell window. Like, right. He's already like, you're going to end the rookie year. He's going to be 25 years old, and people are going to, I mean, look at Tyrone Tracy. Tracy had a hell of a season for the Giants. He's 24 years old, and we're going to talk about a player that they just drafted that I think is a real threat to Tyrone Tracy moving forward. So,
well, we can, you want to just move into that conversation right now, because we have him next on our list. Skattebo goes 105 to the Giants, and I like it a lot. You know, we've been having a conversation about, you know, what landing spots are best for running back, and we've brought up the Giants in kind of passing, not as like one of the main characters of the running back market, but just kind of like one of the side characters of like, you know, if they take running backs, it could be kind of fun. And I think that this is like the perfect situation for Skattebo, where I've been kind of, you know, skeptical about this player, but like you go, you know, 105 is a really nice spot for him. We both thought that maybe he would fall a little more, but he doesn't. He ends up being, and then he goes to a spot where they need a guy like him in this offense, because Tracy is a solid running back, and like he's a lot of fun to watch, but he's not like a beefy between the tackles tackle breaker like Skattebo is. Skattebo can like make you regret trying to tackle him, and that's the kind of running back that I think the Giants needed to pair with Tracy, so then they can use both of them. So while I think like this is a pretty big loss for Tracy, and like that goes back to your RJ Harvey conversation of like, yeah, maybe don't like put all your eggs in one basket of like this kind of older prospect who, is a fine eval on tape, when they could go out and make a move like this and be like, well, this is a player that can play on your first 2 downs and in your short yardage situation. So I like this landing spot a lot, and he's going to move up quite a bit for me because of it.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with how the draft unfolded. Of course, I wanted him to be a day 2 pick. That's how I had him graded. But I think we had enough conversations leading up to the draft where like it was not unexpected that he would be a day 3 pick. I talked about him being a 5th round pick because we've seen that kind of stuff happen before with an older player that has the wear and tear, that's a little bit undersized. The NFL said, nope, we're good with it. Took him at the top of the 4th round. He was a day 3 pick, but he's right in that window of like priority day 4 guys. He goes to the spot, like you said, with the Giants, that there is some room for the taking there. I don't think this is a situation where like we can just say, oh yeah, Skattebo's the guy. Like Tracy had a good year last year. I think Tracy will continue to mix in for them, but I think Skattebo's talent will prevail in the long run here. And at the same time, I also don't think, to be fair, that this is like the picture perfect, like long-term dynasty running back piece. But I don't think you're drafting him to be that either. I think you are drafting Cam Skattebo with the understanding that you might get 3 to 4 years of really, really good production out of this player. And then that's fine. That's fine. He's never going to be that like top 3 dynasty running back, but in my opinion, he will be a productive player for his rookie contract with the New York Giants. So
yeah, he's very much a like plug and play type of guy that is probably going to do like 70 yards and a touchdown. Like that's what you're hoping for. And like maybe he pops every once in a while. Like that's the type of player that I think you want to see out of Skattebo with this kind of landing spot, and churn that out for a couple of years and, maybe sell when he's 26 like you would with any other running back.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if I'm going to move him. I had him in as my 12th player in pre-draft. That could change, but it won't change by much.
Right.
All right, so the next player, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this one. It's Luther Burden. We have held very strong with Luther Burden through all of the the waves and the noise and the chaos that's kind of surrounded his name leading up to the NFL draft. And to a point where we kind of expected maybe there was going to be a bigger draft fall than we were anticipating. We likened it to sort of A.D. Mitchell last year, where there was a lot of noise with him. He ended up falling to the later part of the 2nd round. In this case, Burden did go near the top of round 2. But he went to the Chicago Bears at pick 39, the team that had just selected Colston Loveland at number 10 and had just selected Rome Odunze at wide receiver at number 9 a year earlier. So there's a lot of names here now. What do you think about Burden in this draft slot and on this team?
Yeah, this is another one where my instant reaction was like, I don't know if I love that. And then like you think about it more, because the reason I thought that initially is because he feels a little bit redundant with DJ Moore in their skill sets of like, these guys are so good with the ball in their hands that you should get them the ball early and like maybe have them in the slot so you can get them the ball with some space, working against linebackers. And I still kind of have that in the back of my mind where I don't love the fit with those two players, but at the same time, like DJ Moore is really good and like doesn't have to be like relegated to that kind of role, while Burden probably does. So maybe this limits like DJ Moore uh, out of like a high volume rack position if they're going to have Burden on the field a lot. So I kind of like it where like this I kind of like go back to the Loveland conversation of this team is going to throw the ball a lot. This team is built for like fun upcoming offense where the quarterback kind of comes into his own, and if he's spreading the ball around, like all these guys can get a little bit of love. But when you take Odunze really high last year, you take Loveland really high, you give DJ Moore a ton of money, it's hard to see like the second round, maybe a little bit of a project-y receiver like that becomes tough to say like he's going to be really good right now. But like if they expect him to bridge into this DJ Moore role, then like and they like let him go after this contract, that's where I think you can see the vision of like eventually he can be a really really valuable dynasty piece, but maybe that like doesn't hit right away also. So maybe he slides a little bit down the board because he won't have that instant impact.
Yeah, this is a tough one because everything you just said is why I love the spot for him. Like, because I mean, at the end of the day, he is developmental. Like,
Yeah.
he needs development. So I don't necessarily dislike the fact that he is sitting behind a player like DJ Moore, who is going to fit the similar style that you're projecting Luther Burden to have in the NFL. Getting a chance to sit behind that player, learn from that player. You're getting him in the hands of an offensive mastermind and Ben Johnson that will, theoretically understand how to maximize this player's talent, potentially even as soon as this year. But I do think this year and maybe even next year, it's going to be low volume for Luther Burden. I mean, Rome Odunze, I know, last season wasn't what a lot of people hoped for. We've talked a lot about it. It was still a very positive season in, all things considered for a rookie wide receiver. Now the situation is getting an upgrade. I would expect Rome to take a massive jump forward this season and sort of begin his transformation into being the long-term number one wide receiver for the Bears. Luther Burden, on the other hand, is going to be that more developmental third, fourth, fifth option potentially in this offense this season. So in that sense, he is going to drop in my rankings. Absolutely. Because I had him at number 6 pre-draft because I believed in the talent, and I still do, and I still will, but that will not come at number 6 because the opportunities just will not be there for the next probably 2 years to justify that draft spot. But this is not a bad spot for him. This now becomes a fun dart throw type of player that you're maybe going to get now at the end of round 1, possibly even top of round 2.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm landing is you're probably going to be sitting Burden on your bench a lot for a couple years, and like he'll have moments for sure where you'll be like, I could have started Burden that week, but like he's not going to be a consistent guy that you can throw in week after week. But eventually, I think he works himself into being a consistent producer down the line because he, has some time to develop and become like a better route runner. And so I do like the spot a lot, but you're not going to see great production for a little while, I don't think.
Let's talk about a wide receiver that is moving up the board, perhaps.
I'd say so. Tre Harris next up. He went 55 to the Chargers. This is an Ole Miss wide receiver that has been a Camp Dynasty staple for 2 years because he was a senior last year. Year before that, also very productive. and then he was extremely productive his senior year before he got hurt. Goes to the Chargers, which is always a wide receiver dart throw, destination where Justin Herbert always needs more help. And the got Ladd McConkey last year that drafted Quinshon Judkins a couple of years ago. And that, experiment is still happening. He had definitely looked a lot better last year than he did prior. But Tre Harris just feels like the model of consistency that maybe they need on the outside, because obviously Ladd McConkey is going to own that slot role. And then Harris, good route runner for his size, can be a good vertical threat, can run a variety of routes, and can just be a good big target for Justin Herbert to give a chance every once in a while. And then also, do a lot of other things, because he's really good after the catch. He's just a good, versatile receiver that I think this team sorely needs, because yes, you can go to Ladd a lot, but as soon as coverages start to dictate that you have to go away from Ladd, it's really nice to have a receiver like Tre Harris that is really trustworthy. So I liked this spot a lot. It'll probably pop up a couple spots for me. But yeah, I was pretty happy with this. I also liked when he went, because there was a real possibility that he ended up going a lot later than this, and 55 was a good surprise.
Yeah, I think definitely a very positive NFL draft day for him, both in the where he went and the spot he went. I think honestly, the reason why I don't think he might move a little bit for me, maybe a spot.
Yeah, right.
But the reason why it's not more than that is because we were already high on the player.
Right.
I think we have been pretty high on Harris, like you said. I mean, he's been a staple here. Go back to the summer. This is a top 5, top 6 guy for us in the summer. He was a top 12 player for me at the midseason point. I mean, we've been very high on Tre Harris for the entire process. And to me, I think this, I love how the Chargers wide receiver room is fitting together here, because even though I did have some questions about can Tre Harris play on the outside as an X wide receiver in the NFL consistently, can that be his primary role? I've talked a lot about how I thought he'd be a great slot option, similar to how the Chiefs use Rashee Rice. In this spot, he's going to have the opportunity to prove that he can play as an X wide receiver, because that's what he's going to do here. We're going to finally get, we saw a little bit of this last year, but Quinshon Judkins fully away from playing outside in that role. We get Quinshon Judkins in the Z, we get Tre Harris in the X, and we get Ladd McConkey in the slot. That is a hell of a group, especially if we continue to see development from Quinshon Judkins. But I'm excited to see what Tre Harris can bring to this offense. I think, they lose Josh Palmer. You're getting, the similar sort of skill set there with a player like Tre Harris. But I would hope, and you and I would, say based on how we graded him, that should be an upgrade in that spot long term. So I'm excited to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. We got a few players left. We got one more tight end to talk about here. Another interesting discussion, because we're talking about Harold Fannin, who I think there was always sort of every time we talked about him, it was I don't know what this is going to be come NFL draft week. I have no idea what to expect. All things considered, I would say it was not bad. I mean, he went top of the 3rd round to the Browns, which is the weirdest part about this, I would say. I love that he went in that spot. I love that he was a midday 2 player, but the Browns is such an interesting spot because obviously David Njoku is there. And outside of that, circumstances, the quarterback spot and everything going on there, there's a lot happening in Cleveland these days. But as we've talked about a lot, this is a young developmental player that ideally will be ready to go by the time the next quarterback is there and by the time David Njoku has moved on.
Yeah, I liked this because I wanted him to go, top 75, I would say, was kind of my ideal situation for Fannin, because like you said, he played at a small school. He's a little bit developmental. There wasn't a world where he was going to be, in the same range as like Warren or Loveland or even like Mason Taylor, who ended up going second round. But like 67's still pretty good. And in an ideal world, like him and Njoku could play together because Njoku's like a real tight end, and Fannin's kind of a big slot tight end. He's one of those guys that needs to learn how to play better in line, learn how to be a better blocker. If you're one of those like truthers that says like, yeah, Fannin's a good blocker, he's okay, and he's okay against opponents that they played. So we'll give him a pass, learn how to block from David Njoku, learn how to be a real tight end from David Njoku. But for now, do what you're good at. And like what you're good at is having Joe Flacco pepper you with underneath routes and like go break a tackle. And like that could be a lot of fun, especially because like I talked about before, like this is a really weird wide receiver room where you have like Jerry Jeudy, you sign Deontay Johnson, and like that's it. Where Cedric Tillman, like there's not a lot of names to throw the ball to. And yes, you have 6 quarterbacks that are going to be duking it out for this coveted Browns quarterback position, but I think like eventually this can be kind of fun for Fannin, and like maybe he's not on the field a ton this year and that's all right, but I think like eventually this can work out to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be one where I don't expect him to play at all this season. Like I think best case scenario, they scheme a couple of touches to him just to like get him out there, get him some experience, get him, a little bit of comfort, getting on an NFL field, catching a pass. I don't expect to see almost anything this season from Harold Fannin. So in that sense, I think when you're moving down the board a little bit, that's going to mean a little bit more to me, because to me, Harold Fannin is going to be one of those players that maybe he goes in the 3rd round of a dynasty rookie draft, and maybe by next April, I can throw a 4th that manager's way, and he's going to be like, hell yeah, like this guy sucks. He didn't do anything. Like why would I want him? So that's kind of what it feels like to me. And that's why I do think he is going to drop in my rankings, just based on the fact that I think, you and I, our pre-draft eval of Fannin will always be what it is. But I think now that we have the like clarity of like, okay, he's going to come into the NFL behind a top tight end in the league. I don't expect him to see the field very much for at least this season. Probably going to take him later in a rookie draft if that's the case.
Yeah, I could see him being a little bit more productive than that his rookie year. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be like good, or startable for that matter. But I think he'll, this is a bad team that needs to like get their young players on the field, I think. So I hope they don't like trot Joe Flacco out there and like do their best to win 6 games. I hope that they just go and embrace the rebuild and like open quarterback competition between all these young guys. And, hopefully Fannin can see some snaps and maybe get some, weird inflated games because they want to see what they have in them. That's what I'm hoping for.
Let's do it. If you've made it this far, it's finally time to talk about the other Browns draft pick. No, not the one from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round. It's 5th round pick, Shedeur Sanders, 144. To the Browns as the 2nd quarterback they drafted in this draft class alone. So there's a lot of things to talk about here. There's things about Sanders. There's things about the draft. There's things about the coverage of the draft. What is your initial take to Shedeur Sanders going in the 5th round?
He's going to have a chance to start on the Browns, I think, is my initial reaction, because the team that he went to has a lot of guys that aren't very good. I think like Shedeur has the most talent out of all of them. Now, that out of the way, like everything else that goes into this, everything to unpack is like, this is kind of crazy. Like, I thought there was a chance he'd go like 3 to the Giants. And then you and I agreed that he'd probably go 21 to the Steelers. You had more reservations about Shedeur than I did, where I was like if a quarterback's good enough, it doesn't really matter what goes on off the field. And like, yeah, his dad's like kind of annoying, and like he's been a little bit arrogant about a lot of this, but like, I don't care. Like, guys have done a lot worse and gotten drafted higher. And I thought like Shedeur's tape was solid enough where a team would take a chance on him. And it was very clear that teams had completely written him off their board. And like, there wasn't very many teams that were willing to even give him a second thought. And I think that that's going to end up being a mistake. Like, I think Shedeur has enough talent to be a second round NFL pick. And while there are some like character concerns and all that, like, okay, so my quarterback has an ego, like, whatever. I think if you care that much about how many jerseys your backup quarterback is going to sell, I think you're worrying about the wrong thing. I think you're worried about like, hey, this guy's going to bring attention away. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, give your team a chance to win. That's how I feel. And like, if it's purely tape based and like it's purely player evaluation based, fine. But it just didn't seem like that. It seemed like it's so much more about who Shedeur is, who Dion is, how they went about this pre-draft process and sending a message. And it just felt kind of wrong to like he's better than the 120 of the guys that got drafted ahead of him, in my opinion.
Okay. Let's talk about this. Because I don't think I agree with that. And I think I want to take you back to week 2 when we made a call home for Shedeur Sanders. It was week 2 when they played Nebraska, and they got blown out in that game. Shedeur Sanders left the field early. He left his teammates on the sideline early because they were getting blown out. And then he went in front of a microphone in the press conference and threw his offensive line under the bus for getting him sacked too many times in that game. And I came here, we made the call home, and I said, quote, this is not going to fly in the NFL. Like, this behavior will not cut it in the NFL. And I was very skeptical at that time what to do with Shedeur in my personal rankings, because we don't rank players based off of interviews, character. Like, we don't have any of that. So we're just watching the tape. And you and I were pretty much aligned, give or take a little bit, that this was a good quarterback prospect. I had a second round grade on him. I did not think he was worthy of a top, the Giants pick. Didn't even really think he was worthy of 21, but I thought, when you have second round grades on quarterbacks and the Pittsburgh Steelers don't have a quarterback on the roster that you can start, yeah, of course they're going to take him at 21. But I think what we saw this week was exactly what you can go back to that week 2 incident and so many others that you can point to that aren't behind closed doors. These weren't, and there's been reports about the interviews. No way to corroborate that. I don't know what's true. What's a guy on social media writing something that, I can't speak to any of that. a lot of this has happened right in front of our eyes. Shedeur on Twitter, trashing outgoing transfers and saying, I don't even remember him. What's his name? Because the guy was like, Dion treated me like shit and I wanted to leave. Like, as an NFL franchise, that player cannot be your quarterback. Like, he cannot be the face of your team, talent or not. And that's why I had such a problem with the Mel Kiper stuff this week, because Kiper, as a professional for decades, could not seemingly understand that this fall had nothing to do with his tape. It had nothing to do with his ability to play quarterback. It had everything to do with an NFL team saying, I don't think he's good enough to put up with all of this bullshit that's going to come with him. Do I want him in front of a microphone throwing our guys under the bus after a bad loss and we're a 3-win team as his rookie year and he's crying in the media? Like, that's just the kind of stuff that is not going to work. And I think the only way that the NFL would have ignored that or looked the other way is if he had legitimate top 5 talent, but he did not. I mean, there are legitimate problems with Shedeur Sanders that make him, he's not a player that can walk in week 1 and lead your team because he's that much better of a quarterback than the other guys you have in most cases. So that's my take on it. I think back to that moment and I think, man, maybe we should have seen this coming all along, because it was really kind of right there for us to glean for ourselves with how he acted this year.
I understand 100%. Like, I get why he fell. Like, it's not some shock to me that teams don't want to hitch their wagon to this. But, like, we also, like, live in a world where, ironically, the Browns traded 4 first-round picks for, like, a sexual predator. So, like, okay, yeah, and I understand Deshaun was, like, top 5 in MVP voting and, like, really good player, but, like, I don't want to hear about character concern. Like, when it's about a guy believing that he's good at the sport. Like, I get it. I understand there's a lot of baggage with Shedeur, but, like, I also think his tape is better than a lot of other quarterbacks outside of Cam Ward. I think his tape is better than every quarterback besides Cam Ward that went before him. And, like, if you want to talk about being an objective, like, scout and saying, I'm going to take Tyler Shuck over Shedeur Sanders, that's, like, franchise malpractice to me. Because, like, while maybe you don't want to hitch your wagon to Shedeur to be the face of your franchise, to not even consider him as, like, a guy to compete in a room for your team where you can, like, give your franchise a better chance at long-term success. I'm looking at the Giants. That's a mistake. Like, Jackson Dart might be fine, and, like, that's whatever, neither here nor there. The Steelers, you don't have a quarterback on your roster. Like, this is it's not about him being a bad guy, him being arrogant, him being selfish, him being, whatever. Because the NFL has shown us time and time again that doesn't matter to them when you can succeed as a franchise because of a player. And I'm not saying Shedeur is an outstanding talent that is going to, like, change your franchise overnight, but the fact that you're not even giving your team the opportunity to, like, live in a world where Shedeur does that, I think is silly because of, like, some things that he said over time. And maybe his interviews were terrible and whatever, but, like, none of this was that bad where, like, you should be taking him off your board. I don't think.
I will say, I think the 5th round was a message.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that that's stupid.
I think it was a message. And I also think another part of this, not to go on too long, we will, like, there's Dynasty part to this coming up here, but, like, I do think there is something to be said about the fact that if you take him earlier and he's expected to start and your team is struggling, there will be calls for Deion Sanders to become the head coach. And are you willing to deal with the politics of that situation unfolding? And as a head coach, are you signing up to take this player when you know that your job might be on the line, whether it should be or not? So this is such a unique situation. It's something that we've really never seen before, at least nothing that I can remember of this magnitude. I mean, the way that it was described as an unprecedented, incredible draft fall like we've never seen before. I mean, I think in part that is true, but a lot of it I think is true because of the way that this was framed. And I think a lot of it was framed because of the brand, because of the Sanders brand, where Deion's in the media 2 years ago saying this is going to be a top 5 pick. And I think everybody sort of falls in line with that and says, yeah, okay, he's pretty good. I think like he's got solid skill, and I think he could be a top 5 pick maybe. And then it's like you find out, like Tom Pelissero's reporting, that the NFL in a lot of cases view him as a backup. Like there's not many teams that even viewed him as a starter. So I think there's a lot of factors going on here. That's our take on all of it. It just, we got to get it out there.
There's a lot to unpack.
Lots to unpack. It could have been a whole podcast in itself, I think.
Yeah. This is not like some small, like this was the focus of the draft in the broadcast. Like it's got to be talked about. Like this was the story. This is on like Good Morning America. Like it's not, you might think like, they're fucking talking about Shedeur. Skip ahead. It's okay. I understand. But like, it's kind of it matters.
It does matter. And for our purposes, why are we talking about Shedeur other than just the clickbait? Is
might start.
I mean, like there is a chance that he starts. I'm not going to say that that's not the case, because based on the talent, ignoring everything else, ignoring all of this, circumstances that went into how the draft unfolded for him, I think on a pure talent basis, he has what it takes to start in this room. I mean, Dillon Gabriel being drafted ahead of him, I'm sorry, doesn't really mean anything to me, because that was the one where I was like, all right, you can sell me. I'm not going to agree with you, but you can at least sell me on like Dart and Shuck and Milrow. When we got to Gabriel, it was like, all right, like what?
That is the moment where like Twitter kind of turned and they're like, is this collusion? Which I don't disagree with. I thought I was there with Shuck because I was like, what the hell is that? I
mean, like the way you could sell me with Shuck is like, well, if he was 21, like maybe, but he's like, okay, but he's not. He's 26, so whatever. But
he's 30.
I think in this case, like if you were a super flex league that was, looking at this player and thinking this could be a top 5 pick, and I know this is a player with a lot of fans, so you might have been just a pure Shedeur fan that was looking forward to drafting him high in a super flex draft. No matter what you think of the room, no matter what you think of the spot in general, the talent, anything, in my opinion, you have to listen to where he was drafted, because I think the NFL, in sending this sort of a message to the player, is also saying you're not just going to get handed the job either. Like he is going to have to earn it. He's going to have to prove that he has a chip on his shoulder, that he can grow up a little bit if the reports about his immaturity are in fact correct. He is going to have to prove himself more than I think an average player would, even if we think he has more talent than a 5th round pick. So in that case, from a dynasty perspective, and I'm specifically talking about Superflex here for once, because I think this is really where it's only going to matter, he is going to be a later pick. Like there's no possible way you can justify, well, I liked Shedeur a lot pre-draft, and I don't think this falls indicative of his talent, so I'm going to continue to take him here. You can do that if you want to, but there's no chance in hell that I could co-sign that.
Yeah, if you have a ton of conviction about how you feel about Shedeur, and like you think this was completely unjust and you love the tape and you're Mel Kiper Jr., then like go ahead and take him like whenever you want in your Superflex draft. But if not, then like right now he's a dart throw in a confusing quarterback room that like anybody could end up starting, and it's likely going to be Joe Flacco for at least a few weeks. And then like fans will be calling for Shedeur. Like the Browns still get the same problems that they would have had if he was a second round pick. So like, why not just take him in the second? But that's like, is any of these other like Kenny Pickett or Dylan Gabriel like going to start on this team? I don't think so. So like, I feel like you're going to see some combination of like Joe Flacco, Pickett, Shedeur, that like at some point, like you're going to see a bunch of guys playing the preseason. It's going to be kind of interesting. It's going to be like fun to watch, but I have no idea what this means for like, when is Shedeur going to start? We'll see.
We have one name left.
Yes, we should have probably ended on Shedeur because like going from him to the next guy is like a little bit.
It's okay. We're going to talk about a player that actually might get drafted in a one quarterback rookie draft to end the program, or to end this part of it at least. Devin Neal, talk to me.
Okay. So Devin Neal, I love. We've had a lot of conversation about Neal at my behest, I'd say mostly, but he went 184 to the Saints, and you might look at that and say, I'm going to spin zone this. You ready? You might look at that and say, this is not good for Devin Neal. And at the surface, I would agree with you, but no, this is bad. I was sitting here and I'm like, so right. I work nights, and so I slept through all of day 3 of the draft. And I woke up, and first thing I did when I woke up, no joke, was search on Twitter Devin Neal to see where he went. And I was like, oh no, I don't hate like the landing spot of the Saints is like the silver lining. And like, if I'm going to bet on a late pick like this, it's going to be a guy like Devin Neal. Like would I rank him over RJ Harvey still? Probably. But that's just me, like as a my guy. Like I don't think you should do that. But I got him at like 3-2 in my last Dynasty draft. I don't know where he would have went if I didn't take him. But yeah, I'm not gonna be completely out on him, but he's definitely not gonna be like number 9 overall like he was pre-draft for me.
Yeah, I mean, I like Devin Neal too. Certainly not on the same level as you, but like for me, he was my 15th player pre-draft. I mean, I liked him quite a bit. There was the whispers kind of that he was going to fall in the draft, and I didn't really know how to interpret that because I did think there was a chance that he would still go, round 4. He goes round 6, I believe, is where we're at with 184 or 187, whatever it was, 184.
184.
Obviously, he's going to fall in my rankings. That will be reflected next week when we talk about it. But I agree with you in the sense that I don't think the door is completely shut for Devin Neal just because of where he went in the draft. I mean, we know this is a very talented running back class. We know it was a very deep class. In that sort of environment, I'm less, worried about betting on late day 3 guys that I believe in their talent, because they're going to get pushed down the board based on volume. I mean, this isn't like last year where it's like if you're going in the 7th round, it's like, oh my God, like there were no running backs and you're going in the 7th round. Like you're done. This year, you can sell yourself on some of these guys. We're going to talk about some of these guys in a few weeks when we do Sleeper Court again. Devin Neal might be the first player to go from top 15 to Sleeper Court, but I think this spot, like Kendre Miller, I love Kendre Miller. You can go listen 2 years ago. We got Kendre Miller takes out there on the airwaves from 2023. He has not seized hold of that spot, obviously. I mean, he's barely been healthy enough to even try. And when he's been on the field, it's been okay. But so I think in that case, like the Saints really still don't have an RB2, like a legitimate RB2 that you're looking at. Like, okay, when Kamara's gone, man, maybe this is the guy, you know? Right. I think Devin Neal has certainly the talent to earn snaps this year. Like, truly believe that. I know he went in the 6th round. I believe he has the talent to earn snaps this year, potentially over Kendre Miller. So this is not a death sentence for him. He will move down the board, but all things considered, I think it could have been a lot worse.
I like that.
So I did the spin zone for you. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
All right. Those are the 12 picks that changed the draft. But I don't want to end it there, because there's a lot of really good players that went high in the NFL draft that we've talked about for a very long time that I feel like we need to touch on here, maybe in a little bit, lightning round style. But Ashton Jeanty, first and foremost, he is the 101. Is there a question mark at the end of that now? We might talk about that in a second. But Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders, your thoughts?
Well, this is something that we thought might happen and thought was very realistic. We talked about this on our mock draft where we said, like, we think somebody's got to jump up to 5 if they want to get Jeanty, because the Raiders are probably going to take him at 6. And I think that the Raiders have done a lot of good things. I think their O-line still needs a lot of help. They addressed it in the draft a little bit. But I think, like, they are going to need to give Jeanty the ball a lot because their wide receiver core is not very good. They obviously have Geno over there. They have Pete Carroll over there, who has generally had a run-first mentality. I think, like, he sees a little bit of Marshawn Lynch in Jeanty, of, like, a guy that can break a ton of tackles and get a lot of tough yards. And so I wheels up, like, 101 in every format.
Okay. So you answered the second part of my question already, which is that Travis Hunter went number 2 to the Jaguars. Shocking draft day move. The trade up, James Gladstone, a.k.a. James Gladstones, which is what I'm now dubbing him.
All right, I'm in.
Trading up in his very first draft, very first few months on the job as an NFL GM, trading up to number 2 to select a potentially generational talent in the two-way star Travis Hunter. They say they're going to play him at wide receiver first, and then they're going to ease him in as a DB. Sleeper comes out the day after the draft and says, we're doing the thing. He's getting all the points, no matter where he is in your lineup. I did look. He does not currently have DB eligibility on Sleeper yet. Based on the fact that they released that statement, I would anticipate that that's going to change. But you are already going on record here and saying that next week, nothing's going to change for you at the top. That whole situation does not sway you. It is still Jeanty at the top. Is that correct?
It's still Jeanty at the top just because of the uncertainty around Travis Hunter's role in the league. I was talking to my wife about Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders and the whole situation because, she's not tapped in like we are, but I was like, this is so, like, crazy that I just want to explain it to her. And I found myself, like, talking about Travis Hunter in a different way than I have in, like, a year, because you don't really realize, like, when you're this deep in it and you're talking about it day after day, you kind of lose the, like, plot of all of this and, like, what Travis Hunter really is and, like, how special it is to have this kind of player in the league, and, like, a player that could be playing both ways and, like, is completely unproblematic and has always been, like, a good guy that seems like he's like he's exciting. He is gonna like change this franchise. Like his entry into this, like the press conferences are all awesome, and like he is a freak athlete. He's been like a 5-star. He went to Jackson State. Like extremely likable, extremely like talented, and walks in and is gonna play wide receiver and defensive back. And you sit here and you're like, man, this is just like kind of special. But the reason I'm still going Jeanty 1 in like an IDP league is because like I don't know how much DB he's going to play. Like it feels like we have shifted to the point where he's viewed primarily as a receiver, but like we don't know that for sure. And like if he's playing mostly corner, I'm not taking him 1 overall over Ashton Jeanty, who's going to get like 350 carries. Like that's where I land. Is like we're still so unsure about how many snaps he's going to be allowed to play. That yes, maybe he'll play both sides of the ball, but I can't count on the like assured volume as I can with Jeanty.
We'll talk about Travis Hunter more next week. Tune in to our top 48 final rankings to find out if I have moved Travis Hunter to my 101 spot or if I am continuing to keep Ashton Jeanty.
As somebody who has 101, it's actually
I do have
a
101 in my league, in my main league. So this could mean a lot to 11 other guys, but at least. But I'm excited to talk more about that. I love the spot. That's the, I'll leave it at that for right now. I love the spot. The Jags, incredible spot. Everything they've said so far about how they plan to use him and what they think about him and his long-term ability in the NFL. I think everything has been perfect. Best case scenario for Travis Hunter in terms of fantasy. So we'll talk more about that next week. Tetairoa McMillan. By God. The NFL did the damn thing and took the kid in the top 10. The Panthers are perfect match spot. It seemed like there was no chance of this happening anymore. Everything for months has been defense with them. I mean, they certainly need help on defense, but they prioritize the talent of Tetairoa McMillan and getting Bryce Young a new number 1 option in this offense.
Yeah, I like this a lot. Like I have rather he went to a team with like a real 100% established quarterback, like maybe, but going top 10 and being with Bryce Young, who looked really good in the second half of last year, doesn't hurt. And like having Tetairoa McMillan will probably just help Bryce Young become like ascend even higher. So I think this is a really good sign. Love the player. Like the spot. I wouldn't say like I love it, but it's not like bad. So it's not going to change where he is in my rankings.
3 running backs left to talk about. 3 of our top guys, starting with the number 2 running back in this class, unanimously here on the program and also in the NFL's eyes, because Omarion Hampton did in fact go in the first round. He did not go 20th to Denver, but he went shortly after 22 to the Chargers, the Jim Harbaugh offense that resurrected J.K. Dobbins, made him an RB1 for portions of the season last year. I have to imagine you're excited about this spot for Hampton.
Yeah, this is great. What we wanted to see, I would say, with Omarion Hampton, just an opportunity for him to be an RB1. I know like maybe some people are concerned about like Najee, but like this kind of makes Najee redundant. Like we don't really need to give him a ton of touches. And maybe if you're a Najee owner, you're a little bit upset. I get that. But yeah, this is awesome.
There was some talk if TreVeyon Henderson would end up going in the first round. He did not, but he did go at the top of the second round after Quinshon Judkins, but he did go 38th to the Patriots, which is one of the juicy running back spots that we talked about on Perfect Matches. Henderson is the guy for this Drake May offense. What do you think about that?
I'm all in on this also. They have done a ton to help Drake May in just one off season, and this is another one of those moves. I'm really excited just to see what the Patriots can do in general, because it seems like there's a lot of big play opportunities for this team, and Henderson is just another piece that's added into that so they can do it on the ground and through the air.
Yeah, shout out Kyle Williams, who went later in this draft than I was expecting, but awesome spot with the Patriots. I think the big play element of this offense is really starting to take shape with these two players entering the offense this year. So last guy we want to talk about here in terms of just the landing spot. Again, we will hit on all of these guys next week when we finish up our rankings. Kaleb Johnson, though, this is going to be a big one, I think. I don't think I'm moving him. Like, I might move him a little bit, but like, he went in the third round, 83 to the Steelers, and he went later than I would have hoped for, but man, did he go to the spot that really saved it to, talk yourself back into keeping him in the middle of the first round.
I didn't even hate like where he went. Like, I know it sounds kind of late, but he's a top 100 pick. That's what you're looking for with a running back. Like, I know he didn't go round 2 like RJ Harvey, but like, he fits in perfect with this Steelers run game next to Jaylen Warren. He's kind of juicier version of what Najee was when he left. I think he has a little more upside as a runner than Najee did because he's got a little more speed. So I really like this. Stays in the silver and black. Also great vibes. So I'm all in.
We're not quite there yet on KTC, but I'm interested to see how this plays out over time. If we get to a point where it's Kaleb Johnson plus for RJ Harvey.
Oh, man.
Smash that.
Yeah. I might take RJ Harvey just so I can trade him for Kaleb Johnson plus.
Yes. All right. There it is. An exciting, amazing NFL draft weekend full of, stars, guys that we've talked about. Travis Hunter. I mean, that really, like you said, you get lost in the weeds a little bit. You realize you got a player like this in the draft, and he's just one of many super talented guys that we've been talking about for months and months and months. That all culminates into next week's episode. It's not our last episode of the cycle, but dare I say it's the biggest episode that we do all year long. It is our final post-draft rankings. We will go through our top 48 players. 4 full rounds of Dynasty rookie draft. We will rank our top 48s next week.
Unbelievable that we're almost have this class behind us. It feels it's been a wild ride, and draft day is the culmination of it all. But now we move on to scrolling for camp clips, and then you get to the 2026 class, and you're excited to see the 2025 guys play in preseason, and then the train keeps rolling.
There is absolutely nothing more exhilarating than just sitting on Twitter every day and just typing Kaleb Johnson into the search and just waiting for the clip to come out, and you get one clip. It's just like, oh my God, it's happening.
Yep.
Shout out Jalen Polk, who was going to be the savior for the Patriots wide receiver room. That's how much camp clips mean. But
if only he could catch football.
Yeah, if only he could. If only he did that at a very high level at Washington and then just forgot how to do it in the NFL. But anyway, all right. We will see you next week with our top 48s. If you enjoyed our recap of the NFL draft and the 12 picks that changed the draft the most, including the, clickbait Shedeur Sanders conversation, be sure to find us on Twitter at camp_dynasty and TikTok at camp.dynasty. If you are watching us on YouTube, hello, be sure to hit subscribe and like the video before you leave if you haven't done that already, because we very much appreciate it. And if you are on the pod feed, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, follow, all of the things on the pod feed that you can do there to help the show, because we appreciate that as well.
Yeah, go follow NFL jersey numbers on Twitter so you can see when guys get new jerseys. I saw the Eagles had a guy that was number 46. I was like, Jihad Campbell, number 46. It's Terrace Marshall. So that's concerning.
We've come a long way because I saw that tweet and my first thought was it doesn't matter what his number is because he's not making the team.
Well, that's fair. Yeah,
like,
that's where we're at. They're in the initial 100 whatever guys.
3 years ago, I would have been like, hey, Eagles wide receiver 3, Terrace Marshall, sign me up, baby. Now I'm like, no, it's over. Damn it. Nope. All right. Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.